Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I'm glad you're tuning in. I won't take a lot of your time today, but I do want to spend a little bit of our time looking at this element that's used in literature. Authors use it in every piece of fiction and often in nonfiction as well. This concept and element of characterization. So today I do want to dig into that a little bit because you'll need it for your assignment this week, as well as your final projects that you're working on with your yo-yo book, the one that you've started a couple weeks ago. You did step one, and then last week you were just working and thinking and reading. Hopefully you're finishing your reading. And then this week you're going to do step two. And one of those questions on step two in your Schoology assignment is on characterization. We've talked about this earlier in the year, but it's been a while and I don't expect you to remember everything. And a lot of you don't have your notebooks at home. So I want to unpack characterization a little bit. And then I think that will help you not only with this week's assignment, with the shorts, that you've been working on with your yo-yo book, but also as you really create those final projects, you're going to be able to think about how did your author use characterization in the novel, the book, or the short story that you read. So let's go ahead and look at that right now. I'm going to start here by getting us out of this screen and moving us in to the idea of character. So we've talked a lot about character this year, right? So we have dynamic characters and static characters. We have flat characters and round characters. And those characters are they're who we connect with in that piece of literature. They're how the author often pulls us in so we identify with them. If we feel like we know them, or we like them, or we hate them, or we feel bad for them, we sympathize, we empathize with all these emotions. That's because the author has used this method to really create and develop the personality of those characters for us. I'm going to get rid of my little camera here and then let you see the screen. So characterization is developed in primarily four ways. There are a couple of others that you won't really need to address in high school necessarily, or at least your freshman, sophomore year of high school. But there are four primary ways that I want you thinking about as you are, working on your projects and answering your question this week in your assignment. The first way is through speech. How does the character speak? How do they talk? Do they have an accent? What is the tone that they use? Do they have any slang or certain lingo? That's the diction, the words that they choose, that word choice that they choose when they have a conversation in their dialogue. It's the feelings that they have that create personality. So we can get a sense of who these characters are, right? But how they're talking and how they're talking to other people, how they're talking to their enemies and their friends. So we can learn a lot about them by their speech. That's one way that the author develops characterization. Another way that the author does this, another method, is through their thoughts. So we can learn a lot about, who they are. This personality is formed by what they're thinking inside. We call this an internal monologue. Like whenever you're sort of talking to yourself, that's your internal monologue going on. It's their thought process. When the author shares that with us, we get some insight into who these characters are. Like what are they thinking about? And that does depend on the point of view that the author has selected. But most of the time we can really get an insight, and we can get a glimpse of who they are based on what they're thinking and how they're thinking and processing. The third way is through their actions. This is, what do you see them doing? Characters can often reveal whether they're selfish or kind or generous, whether they're shy or outgoing. How are they? What is their personality depending on how they act? Are they kind? Are they mean? Are they brave? Are they cowardly? How do they react to certain characters? How do they react to conflict that's presented to them? And we have external conflict and internal conflict. How are they responding to that? How do they react to the events in the plot that we can see them in action, right? So that's another way. The last way is when the author describes them to us. Let me get back there. They use their words to describe them. They paint a picture for us of either their physical features, how they're dressed, their body language, their facial expressions. It's how the author paints this picture. We call that imagery, paints a picture with their words to let us know this character. We feel like we can see them. If we saw them on the street, we would know who they are just the way that the author described them. So those are the 4 ways: speech, thoughts, actions, and then imagery and word choice. So I want you thinking this week in your yo-yo book as you're planning, how did your author create those images? How did your author really, hopefully for you, get you to know those characters? How did you identify with them? Which one of these was, and often it's more than one. Hopefully a good author has done and introduced us to more than one method to create that characterization. So that's what I want you thinking about as you're completing your assignment. As you move into your final projects, I also, as you can see, characterization is part of your final project. That's why you're working on it in step 2 this week. Think about all of the elements that you're going to need to include in that final project, and how are you going to organize and communicate them to me. Remember, you were going to choose one of these 4 ways. So step 1 was either choosing the one-pager as some sort of presentation like a Google Slides. That's what this is. So you just create one slide at a time with pictures and words. You could do a PowerPoint. Remember, you also learned how to do Prezi earlier in the year. We did our Prezis with our Change the World projects with the person that has changed the world. So think about, maybe you want to do a Prezi, and any of those and all of those are good options for that visual presentation. It's hopefully a way, those of you that like to use technology, you can do that. The third way, some of you chose, and let me know in your assignments from a couple of weeks ago when you did step 1, is a podcast. A podcast is an audio presentation. And I have 2 different sources that you might want to experiment with to see if you like it. I'm going to show those to you here in a minute. The last option is a written paper. It's a literary analysis paper. And I will give you an example of that. There's more than one way to write it. So I'll give you, a student example, and then I'll give you the how-to sheets like I always do with all of your writing and your essays, if that's the option you choose. Just know that for each of these, all 4 of these options, you have the same requirements. So you have to use the same checklist. Regardless of how you choose to deliver your project, what you deliver, the content is going to be the same. So I do have, on my website, I did put those examples of one-pagers out there. Remember, we did that a couple weeks ago. So they're there if you want to go see them. A Google slide is just like this. You come over here and you click, plus, you add each slide here. You know how to do Prezi. PowerPoint is very similar to Google Slides. The podcast option. The best option that I have found that's free is what's called Soundtrap. And it is really cool because Soundtrap lets you, once you create an account, you can join for free, and then it lets you create a new project here. So I would pick podcast. And once I'm in, I have all these I couldn't even spend enough time. I would take up all your time if I talked you through it now, but you can click on music. It has all these different types of music you can put in the background. You can set different strings, different leads. You have background noises like crickets and waves and all different sorts of options. You also then, you click over here, add new track, and you can then just come down here and record your voice. Remember, a podcast is usually pretty entertaining. I will also, next week, I will post an example of a podcast for you just so you can hear one and know that for as many people as there are, that's that many different ways to record a podcast. But podcasts are more than just talking. Okay? They're engaging. They pull their listeners in. They're usually pretty entertaining, and what they have to say is thought-provoking. So whatever you choose to do, you want to incorporate some creativity still into your podcast. So the one way to do that, and I've done this with a group of teachers, we have a podcast that we have, and this is what we use as Soundtrap. And it's really neat, especially if you had a group project. And I know this isn't a group project, but when you do the group project, you can share it with everybody and everyone can come in. And This way, you would just do new project, and then you would click podcast and you would get started. Unless you're writing music, you could do that too. But for our assignment, you'll just click podcast. Another one that doesn't allow for as much creativity is Zencaster. And Zencaster, so let me pull it up here. Zencaster just records. It's really good if you're doing an interview with someone. So if you wanted to have somebody interview you as if you were the author, that would be kind of fun for your final project. And or you could maybe be the main character or something like that. But it works really cool when it's loading here. It's just a recording track. But it's another one that's free and you can still edit, and it has that capability as well. And it is Zencaster, Zencastr. So if that's the option you're looking for as a podcast, go ahead and experiment with those in a couple of different ways. There are lots of other podcast options. So if you have one that you already use that you're paying for or something, just let me know. I'm okay. I'll listen to anything. But those are two that I know work well and are free right now. And if it's free, it's for me. And that's always my motto. So I'm hoping that this gets you going this week. It gets you thinking this week. Most importantly, really be thinking about that characterization. Be thinking, how is the author creating these characters and help you identify. If you have any questions, you know how to find me. I'll be in office hours, or you can email me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, take care. Have a great day. Goodbye.